In this video, I'm going to show you how to remove and replace the front strut cartridges on a Jeep Liberty, located in the front suspension. Remove the caliper from the knuckle 21mm socket. There's 2 mounting bolts and the bracket to the knuckle. I'm going to use a caliper hanging hook because the whole point is that you don't want to put any strain on the flex hose or the ABS. Just hang it from that top control arm. I'm going to pre-spray the upper ball joint and then the pinch bolt here on that lower strut arm. So with a 21mm socket or wrench, we're going to loosen the upper control arm to knuckle. I like to leave that nut just a little bit on the ball joint shaft before I hit it to pop it out. Separate that upper ball joint from that knuckle, and you can see why we took that caliper off. Now I'm going to take a bungee cord and I'm going to support top to the frame so it doesn't pull all the way out. 18mm socket on the bolt side, 21mm wrench on the nut side. Let's take that pinch bolt out. There we go. Little practice that I like to do is I don't mix bolts and nuts, and that way I know that nut went with that bolt. So 18mm socket on that lower wishbone on the bolt head, and on the other side is a 21. Nice quick way to get a bolt out. Now we're going to take the lower sway bar link off of the lower control arm. 18mm socket. 10mm wrench. We're going to disconnect that negative terminal. Then we're going to go right over to that positive terminal, do the same thing. Same 10mm wrench. And now the hold down is straight down there. So the hold down bolt is right here in the front of the battery facing the grill side. That's a 10mm socket. We're going to take that out, reach down, and you can just pull that right out. Now we have to take the battery completely out because we need to move the battery tray to get to the strut top. On gasoline engines, you'll have this emission evap purge valve right here, and you're going to need to remove that from the tray, and it's just a matter of pulling straight up, twisting and pulling straight up. I'm going to set it aside. Next I'm going to open the fuse box lid, and we're going to take that positive cable off that lid. That's a 13mm. Use a socket or a wrench. I'm going to lift that cable right up, and I'm going to put that mounting nut right back on there. Now with the lid open, you can see you can get to these tabs. There's one there, one there, one there, and one there. So 4 total. You're going to pull on the tab, do the same to all 4 areas. The last one, you might need a little flat blade. It's taking all the pressure. There we go. Now we can shut that. Lift this up. Now you can choose to disconnect the harnesses or set it aside. I'm going to avoid any damage, so I'm going to take this red lock tab, push that out. See if I can release this. Do the same to these. These are the white handle style. I'm going to pull down on them. another red tab. It's a lock tab. We're going to lift up on that. And then you can bring this down. Leave that right there. Might get a little bungee cord and just keep that taut. Now with a body trim tool, I'm going to take the little plastic tab that holds this harness down right out. Now we have 3 mounting bolts back here that are 10 millimeter. Get that right out of the way. So the mounting bolts for the battery tray are right here, one way down in that tunnel. Then we have one right here. So there should be 3 total. And 13 millimeter socket. Two, and then the one that's way down there. So I'm going to take these out of the way. Let's lift this up and see how much clearance we have. Now this little clip right here, just pop it open. You can take a flathead screwdriver, like that. Disconnect that cable from it. Let's lift it up. Now you can see the 4 mounting nuts. So I'm going to pre-spray, let them soak while I take those covers off the other 2. So I'm going to grab this and just wiggle it back and forth. Set that aside. And the same with the harness back here, hopefully. I'm going to try a pair of pliers. See if I can grab it and twist. There we go. So with an 18 millimeter socket, take these all out. I'm just going to grab that last nut right out of the way. And now we can go back under the car. So now I'm going to spray right here, because I'm going to try to loosen this strut up from that wishbone. Comes out a lot easier if you do it that way. Okay, so now I'm going to lift my strut back up and try to hold it there. I want to give the room down below for this wishbone to fall out. With a pry bar or a screwdriver, we're just going to pry this out. There we go. Okay, let's exit it out. Now you're going to want to compress your spring in a spring compressor. You might have the 2-bolt style, or if you have a standard floor style, you want to compress that spring, and then you could take the nut off the top of the mount, pull the old strut cartridge out, holding the spring in place. Now that's a 15 millimeter socket. So you see how the shaft is spinning in place? So what I do sometimes is I'll put pressure back on that. It doesn't hurt to give it a little love. So I'm just holding that plastic, being careful, and I worked it and I got it off there. Now we're going to discard that. You don't want to use the old one. Remove the mount, set it aside. I'm going to compress the spring just a hair more. It's okay, you can do that. All right, now this might be frozen in here. It's very common for this to happen, especially when you have a thick rubber bushing like that. So with a pry bar or a long screwdriver, I'm just going to work this around, see if I can get this to pop out. Here we go. Now we're going to reuse this. So we're going to slide this off. So here we have our new strut cartridge, and I always recommend starting these, and you just want to push down, all the way down, till it bottoms out, and let it bring itself back up. I'm going to do this like 2 to 3 times. You'll start to feel the difference. You might actually have to take a rag or something, because that gets kind of sharp. What we're doing is starting the gases and oil mix so that that strut cartridge is firm. While that's going up, we're going to reinstall this, and you'll see that notch right there. Set it right there on that base notch, right like that. And it kind of tells you right where the stopper is going to go on that spring. It's right on this side. So now we're going to slide this up. And seat that right where that notch is. Just like that. Grab our mount. So we're going to take that nut off. I'm going to place that right over there. Just like that. Take our new nut. These have Teflon on the very tip of them, so they are self-lockers. Now I can get my 15 millimeter. I'm going to snug it up best as we can. Making sure if that moves, that base moves, always double check. Make sure it goes right back into place. So I have a 15 millimeter ratchet wrench and a 6 millimeter 1/4 inch drive or wrench. I'm going to hold the center shaft of that strut, and I'm just going to snug this up till it's ready to be torqued. I'm going to keep an eye, once I get close enough, I'm going to keep an eye on where those mounts go and those bushings. All right, now everything's in place. We can back off on the compression of the spring. Keep checking, make sure that everything's seated correctly. Once there's pressure on that, I'm going to leave it just like that, and I'm going to go get my torque wrench, and I'm going to torque that. So 15 millimeter socket, pry bar or screwdriver in the mount to stop it from spinning. I'm setting my torque wrench to 31 foot-pounds. So this is the what they call a wishbone bottom part of that strut, and you want to get all that rust out. I found a quick way to do it is with a cotter pin and some sandpaper. In this case I have emery cloth, and just put it in there. Look at that, takes all the big chunks out. Now I'll put some like Never Seas in there, and we'll be ready to go. So I'm going to put the wishbone in first. Make sure that the pinch bolt is facing you. See if I can get that out of the way as much as possible. I'm going to grab the new spring strut. Now look up in the housing to confirm you have the 2 closest bolts here and the furthest bolts there. So it's going to go in just like that. It's because there's a round part right there, and the round part is facing the engine side. Okay, now what I'm going to do is set that right there. I'm going to go up on top, and I'll lower the vehicle, and I'll start all 4 nuts so that way I can hold the strut steady. So now we can see the top of the strut mount where it goes up through that strut tower in the engine compartment, and I've got one of the nuts in my hand. So you have to reach down through the fender well and grab that spring and kind of pull it up. And I'll just grab another one, put it opposite side. You can start all 4 of them. I would recommend it. I'm not going to tighten them because we want the play on the bottom half so we can move that strut around and get it into that wishbone. But we just want to make sure that it's going to stay up there. No, we're not going to fight it while we're trying to put it in. Okay, now we'll raise the vehicle back up. So with my pry bar, I'm going to put right here in the coil spring and on the top of the knuckle, and I'm going to pull down on that lower control arm and see if I can line this wishbone up. Now, see, it's pretty easy. It falls right into place, just like that. All right, so now that I've got this wishbone, I'm going to make sure it's bottomed out in the right position. I put my bolt through, and I did clean threads and add a little thread locker on there because it is suspension. There is a torque spec to it. That's a 21 and an 18 millimeter. So 21 millimeter wrench or socket. The head of the bolt is 18 millimeter. Snug that up, and now I'm going to get my torque wrench. All right, so the torque spec on this pinch bolt is 75 foot-pounds. Now we're clear to put the upper control arm ball joint back in that knuckle. So I'm going to take my bungee cord out of the way. And I'm going to bring this right over, lift it up. Okay, let's get the nut. So now we can just take the knuckle, bring it up, start it. Let's get that nut on there. Now we're going to lower it down and we're going to tighten and put everything together up on the top. So now I'm going to take my 18 millimeter socket and I'm going to snug these up in a crisscross pattern. Now we're going to torque them. 18 millimeter socket, crisscross torque, and it is 80 foot-pounds. Double check. All right, so now we're going to put the pieces that were back together on top of these strut mount bolts. Now that is the vent tube with that front differential. It's very important. And then we have just a harness. Now we're going to take that battery tray and put it right back in. All right, now we're going to put our battery tray back in. I'm going to line up that long bolt right down there. Make sure we get everything out of the way. There we go. Let's put the nuts back on. We have one in this well, one over here, and then one way down that well. The nut on the extension and go down. Nice. And I'll just take my 3/8 electric gun and we'll snug them up. We're going to put this cable right back in the holder. You can actually see where it was. I guess for best results, line it back up and then just click it down and lock. There we go. Now we can put our fuse box mounting bracket back in. Those two tabs right there, slide it under, and that will line up the bolt holes in the back. There we go. Put the 3 6mm bolts down in. That has a 10mm socket head. There's 3. Get my extension, and we're just going to snug them up. Now we're going to undo our bungee cord that we had holding the electrical box. Get that out of our way. Now let's get the box over in position. Pretty much we know where it's going to go. We know that this plug is going to go right there. They're pretty much match proof. You can't crisscross them. So that center one, click and push down on that red lock tab. There we go. Pull that down, lock, and push down that red tab. Last one goes here. All right, so move that positive cable out of the way. Your harnesses basically fall right into place. You're going to put these 2 tabs and the 2 on the other side right in place. Once they line up, a firm little push, you'll hear them all click into place. Now we can open our lid. And there is our positive cable going to that box. Now removing a nut like this, I would use an electric tool. Tightening, I would not use an air or electric. That has to be felt by hand. We're going to bring it down right till it's snug and give it a nice quarter turn. That is nice and snug. Let's close the lid. So now we're going to put the emission valve back on that little bracket. Pull it right down, push it, and there it goes. Now we can lift up our battery. Okay, let's get all the cables out of the way. Make sure they're free, and they are. I'm going to put the hole down in first. You're going to want to line up those notches with the notches right on the tray. Like penetrating spray in the bolt because I don't want it to break in the future. Now positive first. Make sure it seats all the way down. I like to take a battery, and because that's a lead post, it can crack internally and you won't see it. I always pull up on the cable and give it a good 1/8 of a quarter turn. Now we're going to put the ground on, do the same. Make sure it sits all the way down. 10mm wrench. We're going to do the same thing over here. Grab that cable, give it a good tautness until we get it bottomed out in a quarter turn. Check them, and let's put our cover back on. So now we're going to take our 21mm wrench. I have a 7/8, that's for standard, just to snug this upper ball joint nut in place before we torque it. And to torque all the suspension on this vehicle, you're going to want it at ground level. So I'm going to use a floor jack to bring it down and torque everything. So now before we put the link in, we have to bring this control arm up so that we can torque everything to level specs as if it's on the ground. Obviously with the wheel on it, I would be able to get to half the stuff to torque it. So I'm going to use a pole jack. You can use a floor jack at home, anything that's equivalent. That's going to be good enough to put a load basically on the suspension and raise it up. $8mm socket. We have it at ground level with a load on it. We're going to do this 75 foot-pounds for that sway bar link bolt. Now the wishbone nut and bolt. This is 21 on this side, 18 on the other, and the torque spec for that is 110 foot-pounds. So while the suspension is ride height tension, we're going to put a 21mm socket on the upper ball joint nut, and we're going to tighten that to 30 foot-pounds. Now we can undo the pole jack and bring the suspension down. Now we can put our brakes back. Back into the caliper bracket to knuckle. Always starting by hand. Get a top one and a lower one. Now I'm going to snug it up. Caliper bracket to knuckle bolts are 21mm socket, and it's 100 foot-pounds. Double check. So now I'm going to reconnect that ABS sensor wire to the actual flex hose. Now we're going to reinstall the wheel. Put your lug nuts on. It's going to be a 19mm socket. We're going to snug them up in a star pattern or crisscross. Just bottom them out. Now we're going to lower it and torque the wheel to spec. Wheel torque for this car is 85 to 115 foot-pounds, and we're going to go at 110. I recommend using the age of the vehicle, and the higher the number for older wheel studs and lug nuts because they get stretched. Double check. After finishing this installation, it's important to have an alignment done on your vehicle. When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.